For my service learning project, I mentored a middle school student using the pseudonym Jordan. As an RBT pursuing my master's degree in applied behavior analysis, I approached this experience through the lens of relationship building. This project reminded me that meaningful growth begins long before intervention. It begins with trust, connection, and understanding the person in front of you. One of the most important lessons I've learned in behavior analysis is that behavior doesn't happen in isolation. Every behavior has a story, and every student brings unique experiences that shape how they learn and interact with the world. Before trying to change behavior, we first need to understand what may be influencing it. Jordan is a 13-year-old middle school student. During our first conversation, I intentionally focused on getting to know him instead of immediately discussing school performance. We talked about his interests, hobbies, and goals. Building rapport first helped establish trust and created a more comfortable environment for meaningful conversation. I endorse a strengths-first perspective. Rather than focusing on challenges first, I wanted to identify Jordan's strengths. He demonstrated curiosity, creativity, and thoughtful problem solving when discussing topics he enjoyed. This reminded me that students are much more than the difficulties they experience. Beginning with strengths helps create confidence and establishes a positive foundation for growth. One principle that continues to shape both my coursework and my work as an RBT is understanding that behavior communicates something important. Instead of asking what's wrong with the student, I've learned to ask, what is the student trying to tell me? What is the student communicating? That shift in perspective encourages empathy, curiosity, and more effective support. Throughout the mentoring process, I focused on strategies that promoted both growth and independence. We practiced open communication, discussed realistic goals, reflected on progress through regular check-ins, and celebrated effort along the way. These approaches encouraged Jordan to build confidence while taking ownership of his own development. One of the biggest lessons I've taken from both this course and my clinical work is that emotional safety creates the conditions for learning. Students are much more willing to ask questions, make mistakes, and try again when they feel accepted rather than judged. Trust becomes the foundation for both learning and positive behavior change. My first intervention wasn't a strategy designed to change behavior. It was building rapport. I intentionally practiced active listening by asking open-ended questions and allowing Jordan to share his thoughts without interruption. Instead of immediately offering solutions, I focused on understanding his experiences. As our conversation progressed, I observed increased engagement and more willingness to discuss both strengths and challenges. That rapport became the foundation for every other mentoring strategy that we used. Rather than creating goals for Jordan, I involved him in the goal-setting process. Research consistently shows that students are more likely to engage when they have ownership over their learning. Together, we identified realistic goals related to organization, confidence, and academic success. As Jordan became more involved in setting expectations, I noticed greater participation and increased motivation during our conversations. Positive reinforcement isn't simply about praise. It's about recognizing behavior we want to encourage. During mentoring, I acknowledged effort, persistence, and growth rather than perfection. Celebrating small successes helps students develop confidence and motivates them to continue working towards larger goals over time. While this mentoring experience was relatively brief, I observed several meaningful indicators of progress. Jordan became more comfortable engaging in conversation, demonstrated increased confidence when discussing his strengths, and participated more actively in setting personal goals. Although these changes were qualitative rather than formally measured, they represented observable improvements in engagement and self-reflection. From a behavior analytic perspective, these small changes suggest a positive trend that could continue to strengthen with consistent mentoring. Throughout my mentoring experience with Jordan, I observed gradual but meaningful changes in his confidence and engagement. Rather than expecting immediate transformation, I looked for small, measurable indicators of progress, such as increased participation, greater willingness to discuss challenges, and more confidence when identifying personal goals. In behavior analysis, we often evaluate trends over time rather than isolated moments. And Jordan's progress reinforced that consistent incremental growth is often the strongest indicator of meaningful change. As I reflect on this mentorship experience, I'm reminded that relationships are not separate from intervention. They are the foundation of it. Before students are ready to learn new skills, they need to feel understood, respected, and emotionally safe. That realization has become one of the most valuable lessons I've taken from both mentoring and my graduate study. As I continue working toward becoming a board-certified behavior analyst, I hope to combine evidence-based practice with compassion. Data and interventions are important, but lasting change happens when students know someone genuinely believes in them. This mentoring experience helped me shape the kind of professional I aspire to be. Thank you for joining me on Jordan's mentorship journey. I hope Jordan's story reminds us that meaningful change begins with understanding, connection, and believing in every student's potential. Here is a reflection question before we go. If behavior is communication, what should we understand before trying to change it? I'll give you a second to answer. Answer: the student's story, strengths, and needs. Happy mentoring!